Hallo, Ludunya, Kevin Hashu, Hami Giordolianu video big garage. Falcha, if it's going to be in English, this video, but that's because it's got a cultural aspect to it. I'll obviously be throwing in Gaelic in here and there, but what we're trying to do today is we're going to mark. I've actually got the wrong, what was I here? I mirrored the wrong island behind me. I've got Lewis and Harris. My head seems to be covering the herring, but we're going to be looking today at happens to be the a video of that shows the 110th anniversary of the birth of Sorley Maclean, Sorley Maclean, the great Gaelic bard, and in fact one of the most important bards in Europe in the 20th century in great consideration. So again, those of you who don't know who Sorley is, this is Sorley when he was a young man, I think as a teacher either in Blockton or perhaps while he's still at university, and as he grew older, I think I've got any photos of him as he's an older man, but because I think the fact I've got my I have the you'll see photos of him as an old bodach in the tweeds, and that's it. So who was Sorley Maclean? Where was he born? He was born today 110 years ago in the Isle of Raasay, and that was where he grew up in a large family, and his brothers and sisters all went on to be very successful. Many of them were doctors, teachers, academics, and Sorley himself went to Portree High School as a pupil, as many people did when they went on to be academic. They would leave their small community and go to Portree High School, and then he went off to Edinburgh University where he studied English, although there was Celtic going on at the time there as well. Sorley went off, and probably taken around this photo taken, he went off, he studied English. He talks about it would have been economically disastrous to have studied Gaelic at that point, and he was probably quite right at that point, because there wasn't much going on in terms of Gaelic education other than some Celtic stuff and some things for fluent speakers. But anyway, what happened when Sorley was there, he got into Marxism, communism at the time, obviously 1930s. He got into teaching as a job, and he started to write poetry. He was very much influenced by all the usual, T.S. Eliot, Yeats, all these types of people, Ezra Pound, all these people who were kind of involved in Gaelic poetry at that time. And at that point, Hamish Henderson started to come on the scene. There's the Scottish Renaissance starting to kick in. You've got Neil Gunn starting to write his Highland English books. You have all these kind of people starting to come online, and Sorley's part of that. Obviously, the rise of fascism is worrying people at that point, and Sorley has his communist sympathies, and he's mixing around radical circles in Edinburgh, and he meets he meets a very supposedly a couple of nobody's entirely sure, it's never very clear, that he meets a couple of women who he kind of falls in love with, but he kind of just uses them more as a muse, more as a kind of a cowrie, a muse, to create some very, very incredible love poetry in Gaelic and in any other language. And then at the same time, there's a Spanish Civil War. In fact, I was going through my books when I was looking for books for this. There is Anthony Beevor's The Battle for Spain, and of course the Spanish Civil War was kind of a proxy for what was going to occur a few years later in the 1940s. And Sorley, as a committed Marxist and communist, wanted to go to Spain but had to support his family, so he became an English teacher and stayed in Spain, and that informs also the set of poems that he published during the Second World War called Dain to Eivor, poems to Eivor, and Eivor being the wife of Cuchulainn, and she is used as that name is used for all the various women that he's kind of writing poets for, or uses a muse to kind of explore his political viewpoints. And you can get the Dain to Eivor thing. So we'll look at a few of the books, we'll talk about that. So then after that war, he also writes war poetry, and but then he kind of gets over the woman, and he marries lovely Rennie, who was from Inverness and sadly passed away just a few years ago. Rennie, but she was a lovely woman and had a family, and he became was the head of English at Barrowmuir. After having taught in Mull for a short time, he was the head of English at Barrowmuir, having also taught in Portree, and then he became the head teacher at Plockton, where he spent a great deal of his life. And whilst he was there, Sorley had a great impact upon Gaelic education. He made it. He actually campaigned for Gaelic learners to be introduced, and he ended up having that, and then he had a successful retirement. And as he had a successful retirement, his poetry became known again, and people started to explore his poetry in much more detail, as there was kind of a Gaelic Renaissance on top of the Scottish Renaissance, and as his poetry became more well known, Sorley's reputation grew and grew, and he spent his retirement really until his death to be considered one of the premier poets, not just in Scottish Gaelic, but in terms of Scotland and in terms of Europe, and so much so that even folks such as Heaney and people like that talk about him. We'll talk a lot about that in a second. So, however, one thing about Sorley's poetry, like I said, it can involve love, a very poetic love. It can also involve a lot of politics, and also a lot of it deals with a lot of very rich Gaelic, concerned with the Isle of Skye and Raasay, and Gaelic culture and history, and there's lots of very, very interesting type of things. Now, if you want to find out a lot about Sorley the person, you'll obviously find, now this is the big one. This is the big one you can get. Sorley Maclean collected poems, Cúr Leimreach, and it's done by you'll see Christopher White and Eamon Dimmock there. And Christopher White kind of did the first most comprehensive version of Down to Ever that exists as well. You can buy that, and it looks at all the poems as a series. But this one collects pretty much everything that Sorley ever did, including unpublished poems. And Down to Ever is like a series of poems, all with numbers. Some of them have been retitled in futures. I can't find it. Rohirst is Colntry, which is the premier kind of compendium of Sorley Maclean's poetries that kind of collects ones from various eras. But he has the poem, and there's Fiches Aga 22, and we'll have a wee read of that one just while we're here. And this one, Sorley was talking to his reason about the reasons why he's not gone to Spain and how he feels about that. So, Chosich mi kujirima hikshe, a muiri tube chuain, vashin kala achva ishe, furoch cheat and boom. En shin huun de ie gra, a veli viergen goal, u geweel de gulgjal alleen, pausig traatje woe. Vaak min krie vageri, nam vraljach reepje lua, is hoorst mi ha mi keensjoch, kerson bevrieg gewoon. Kimmer is smuinigin gen glachin, en drunak leeg hoor, gen beden oor, gen kurni, gu keelwoch nam a volk. Ga de gaaf me se baas krankezi, en jegen groeine Spaan. Is kimmer sin victulakum, ri uun dus uur en naan. Ga de leen mi achen klie grien, vik iersel hidem hwa, is kimmer sin a chanichen, ri beher henje graai. Achnen roen die isko, is min am hesu in aarst, lemen en jeven no jurna, lis spirit is kreas slaan. Now, if you ever heard, I would recommend you go to sorleymaclean.org. You'll hear Sorley himself reading these poems, and to really hear Sorley read his own poetry is very much a real experience. It's like hearing somebody using the real rhythms of their language, of almost like hearing somebody. It's kind of it's almost like pipe music, and it's an incredible way, incredible sonorous voice, which is well worth exploring on there. But I hope that gives you an idea of the rhythms, what you're dealing here as well. And as we go through the English, if you don't speak very much Gaelic, you'll hear he's talking in a kind of very metaphysical, very complex way, but using a very traditional structure for his rhyme scheme. So here it is in English. I walked with my reason out beside the sea. We were together, but it was keeping a little distance from me. Then it turned, saying, "Is it true you heard that your beautiful white love is getting married early on Monday?" I checked the heart that was rising in my torn swift breast, and I said, most likely, why should I lie about it? How should I think that I would grab the radiant golden star, that I would catch it and put it prudently in my pocket? It did not take a cross's death in the hard extremity of Spain, and how then should I expect the one new prize of fate? I followed only a way that was small, mean, low, dry, lukewarm. How then should I meet the thunderbolt of love? But if I had the chance again and stood on that headland, I would leap from heaven and hell with a whole spirit and heart. So that kind of thematic about Spain, not going to Spain, not feeling worthy of Eva's love. But if he had gone there, he'd have died. So there's kind of this complex going on there in terms of what Sorley could do at the time, and then how he feels about this. Whether it was great feelings or whether it was more to use this woman as a kind of a poetic device to help illuminate the poetry is all very interesting, and you can read it throughout the poem. I believe actually I'm trying to remember how many there are off the top of my head. Caveat the Hound. You get up to here we go, catch you. I think it goes all the way up to 60. Yes, 60 plus a dimito. Hala Lloric nyo eki, Everkistjach na Stulen Egoch, Gebaka Hu Hanilubriagoch, Nam Skuli Skia Bew too harshly action. Go little ineffective book, look into our shining eyes. Though lame you are no liar. In the time of wing spreading you will be over mountains. So I think most poets feel that about their books when they do it. Achanoorshin Marahorshmi, obviously Sorley was a communist, but also happened to be a Scottish nationalist as well, which is also a tension as well for socialists, especially at that time. And but eventually he didn't, unlike George Campbell, who became a conscious objector, but did eventually go to war. We'll do a George Mackie and George some other time. Sorley did go to war, and he fought in the north of things. And there's some amazing Gaelic poetry. In fact, probably his best Gaelic poetry from that period, in my opinion, is more of the war stuff. And there's you can have Glacavage, Curian, La Fugger, and they are all very good, and they're very much of the one thing that Sorley Maclean really hates is Nazis. He's kind of like the Indiana Jones of Gaelic. So hallelujah, Glacavage, Death Valley. Hwrs nasoch Corrigan gyn te computer yr ashte i'r na germaltje, chor ag yn sonus bast uwt yn ons yn ari. Na hu je maraf yn Glacavage, vol gyrwym rwysit, gil je ogs al wokken shies magrwai is a hwyr grisian. Smunig meer chor is na ag a hwyr efo hwyrer, bif toetje man om rwn en aar gyn eri tullig. Er grinniges is er chliw nach deur in de uner, get beesten bevronig gesnoeg aan een glach gil lumig. Le kuliak in mugger glas, gan a bich lach gyn, is a salig buie, is landje rach, bes je spurjich ka. En roon gilje in een dream a vaap na juichs na commonich, no in een dream bevoor jusen, a hrarig ag vo horsig aal, gun John geboerig, is broelien kuich ach blaar, ska oakeren. Gebea Jansen no a chas, en jachintos njom virun. Gaat er nog een talgig naar waas, voor geen bullshit. Sorry, I mean, sloot me vaak, sorry, spoil my words here. Some Death Valley, some Nazi or other has said that the Führer had restored to German manhood the right and joy of dying in battle. Sitting dead in Death Valley before the Ruiset Ridge, a boy with his forelock down about his cheek and his face slate grey, I thought of the joy, the right and the joy that he got from his Führer of falling in the field of slaughter to rise no more. The pomp and the fame that he had, not alone, though he was the most piteous to see in a valley gone to seed, with flies about grey corpses on a dun sand, dirty yellow and full of the rubbish and fragments of battle, was the boy of the band who abused the Jews and communists, or of the greater band of those led from the beginning of generations, unwilling to the trial and mad delirium of every war for the sake of rulers. Whatever his desire or mishap, his innocence or malignity, he showed no pleasure in his death below the Ruiset Ridge. So, again, going to war had a big impact on Sorley, and he includes that, and he makes it very, very good. And it's a good, shows the going to fight for anybody in any war is a really, daft thing, really, in particular, for the Nazis. So, Nasoch he's not a fan of the Nazis, which rightly so, because if you ever see a Nazi or a fascist, punch them. That's the best way. Anyway, as he becomes a teacher, there's a great one, and he's got a good, now if you can track this one down, if you want to find out a little bit more about Sorley, there's other books that you can read. So, like I said, Sorley Maclean, this is the big collection. It's a big hefty, I think, I can't remember how much this cost me, 25 quid this cost you from Polygon. And it's actually is worth having in the house, because it's a really, really powerful thing. Everything's here. But if you're, if you find that a little bit, that's quite a lot. And also, Berleg's Gaelic Ounce, so no, that's a chapter page. If you want, you can find all the, Gaelic, English, Gaelic on either side, and it's worth exploring. But if you want to find out a bit more about Sorley, obviously there's a lot in here in the forewords and in the thing. But if you really want to find out quite a lot about Sorley, a little bit about the real guy, the real man. But one book I'd really recommend, and I can't actually show you, I do have the cover somewhere on here, but I can't because I'm using this flip, is if you look up Highland Herald by David Ross. Highland Herald, and Dave is a wonderful guy. He was the Herald correspondent for the Highlands for many, many years, and he is married to Sorley's youngest daughter, Mary, and they're both retired to Inverness. They lived in Cromarty for a long time. And Dave also got to know Sorley as his father-in-law, and it's very, very, it's a great. There's about 3 chapters about Sorley in the book, or there's one main one, and then there's Sorley appears at other points in the book. So well worth exploring. That really gives you an idea of Sorley, because you hear lots of great and interesting little anecdotes about Sorley over the years. That he could be quite an eccentric character, and he had a great knowledge about genealogy, Sorley, and that comes through in a lot of the later poems as well. Would make connections with people going back to Brexit. But you read all about that in Dave's book, and it's a really good testimony to a personal relationship as well, and gives you an idea of a writer as a human being, which is, I think, the one thing that comes through in all Sorley's poetry, even though his work operating at a very high level of poetry, that you get a real sense of his humanity, and that's part of the reason that he is still to this day resounds with a lot of people, especially when they start to develop. Now, if you're learning Gaelic as well, so as he grew older, there's a great line in Reach Every Week though about which is a collection of his prose writings, and one talks about just he chose the career, or the vocation least amenable to the muse, or something. He uses some phrase like that, which means pretty much became a teacher, and that meant that he got very busy and very tired, and that meant that he wasn't able to write as many poems. But even then, he still wrote some very, very powerful poems, and of course the most famous of them is Hallig, which I won't read the full thing here, and then I actually read what Seamus Heaney says about him, and you can actually find Seamus Heaney's translation of this on The Guardian. But there's Hallig, and it's a chim in fiag an call Hallig. Ha boers the tarnian near Nunyak from Fakim in art and year. As Hamagulig alt Hallig na Cruvea Sairia with an intended Spolavania. Als a vos me balakoord, heine bea na Kaltin na Kurin Yirich Hingur. Al scraped al Mochini faro Taramat as a moor, and the Nien as the meek and Kalye, Galsus between them lawn. Uivroch a noch na Kalye Huish, Garamir Melochrock and La, Giroch and Dreim Jigalich, and Yets and Kalye Magrai. So, the thing that Sorley's there talking about the village Hallig in the east coast of Rassay, which is a cleared village, and Rassay suffered incredibly in the Highland clearances, and you'll find that throughout there. And he's uses a lot of tree imagery, something which I'm always a little fan of doing, and there's a whole bunch here. And for example, if you really want a really good little selection of Sorley poetry, I don't know how easy it is to get this book now. I used to get it in every Gaelic classroom, but you'll find it from Canongate, and it's No Avarstoch Gaelic, modern Scottish Gaelic poems. If you want a really good taster of Sorley, almost everything that's really, really, really good. This shows how good Noel Macaulay was at not just at editing, creating. In here, he really, I think there's maybe about 10 Sorley poems in here, and it shows the connections of here, and you end up with Amur Gorum, which is part of the Coolin, Cavanich, Duralabris Mimudin, Catachur, Devur, Agriev, Gurden and Rowan, the Choicers. Then you have Con Mad Ali, Chud the Heron, Halig, and then I think this one has the full text of Kilchin Rarsai, which is the woods of Rarsay, and he just talks about, he kind of brings the trees alive as if it's a big thing. And then I'm trying to think what else we got. Oh, Banagale, Highland Woman, and Glacavash. So you get in here Iguayet. So there's maybe about 15 poems in here, and it's a really good wee. This is a good one. This is probably, if you're going to get into Gaelic poetry, this one also has Rory McComish, Derek Thompson, Ian McGill-Eain, Ingrid Smith, Bill Macaulay, Dal Macaulay, and George McKean, George Campbell. Hey, they're all here. Hi, Rita David, coming down you. So what we're talking today, guys, if you're joining us, is we're talking about Sorley Maclean and his 110th anniversary of his birthday. Of course, Sorley passed away in 1996, so he had a good long life. And like I say, towards the end of his life, after he retired from teaching, he started to create a lot of poetry. And we're talking about Halig there, and Halig, if you want to find it, you'll find some very good translations of it. I first heard it, and some of you may follow my good friend Father Schmo on here, Sorley MacDonald. He's an artist who went to school with me in Inverness, and Sorley was the person that introduced me to Sorley via the music of Martin Bennett. Sorley was brave enough to do it as a set text, not actually a set text, did it for, I think, what we called the RPR, which I think was your record of personal reading, and he did it in Higher English, and he had to fight to do it. He did it in translation, using actually the translation that's in here, and but he got an A, and he did it, and so you follow Sorley, Father of Schmo, you'll find him on Instagram. Amazing stuff. Buy his stuff. In fact, the pictures, you sometimes see a couple of pictures of his behind me in these shots. Well worth checking out. Buy his stuff, amazing. And he that was it. So anyway, he did that. So he got all that. As he got older, Sorley became more and more renowned throughout Europe, and he began to be met and the things. And so here we have, for example, this is a little thing that Seamus. This is a great wee book, Stepping Stones. I'm talking of my pal Beth Anna from Nechechan from Nova Scotia. She loves a bit of Seamus Heaney. But here's what Heaney has to say about a Halig. And he says, now I do quite a reasonably good Seamus Heaney impression, but I'm not going to do it because I'll embarrass myself. But anyway, this is what Seamus has to say about a Halig by Sorley Maclean, and this shows really the esteem with which Sorley is held amongst the great poets. I mean, there's probably Seamus is probably one of the few people that can probably outdo Sorley in terms of skill. Liut, it's a good word. Liut, L-I-U-T, Liut. So anyway, so what Sorley says here is, I take the world of Gaelic-speaking poet. In translating Halig by Sorley Maclean, you made contact with yet another hidden Scotland. This is the interviewer. Would you place Halig in a different class from the rest of Maclean's work? And it says, I take the word of Gaelic-speaking poets and critics that Dying the Aber is an epoch-making book. In order to know what's going on in the sequence, I'm nearly entirely dependent on translations by Sorley himself and by Ian Crichton Smith. Well worth checking out Ian Crichton Smith's translations. Halig, on the other hand, I've been able to enter gradually on my own, partly because I have enough Irish to go word for word into the sense of the Gaelic, partly because I have the cadences of it in my ear from hearing the poet read it, as we said. Try and find recordings of Sorley speaking, and partly because I know the kind of place the poem evokes, a setting of deserted wallsteads, houses with roofs fallen in, and gardens and outgoings all overgrown with shrubs and nettles, the kind of thing you used to see everywhere in Ireland, in the south and west especially, although there was just such a ruin dwelling on land very close to our own place in Derry. Maclean's homesteads were cleared by a landlord, so there was a tragic dimension to their solitude, yet the Halig scenario was still a familiar one. And when I read the first couple of lines, Ha boers is turning Erin Unyak Trumpfak in heart and ear, I'm both home and away. Everything stands clear again in the uncanny light of poetry. There's a board nailed across the window through which I saw the west. It wasn't too hard to find a tune for the words, because I had Sorley's voice in my ear from the start. There you go. More recently, I thought I would do some Irish language translations, one of poems that I know and loved for pleasure and joy. I now actually like translation because it's a form of writing by proxy. You get the high of finishing something you don't have to start. So anyway, that shows how much esteem that his fellow poets had for him, and he was very much considered to be, as I say, across Europe, to be one of the his poets. And when you read his poetry, you hear the rhythms, you hear the rhymes, the metre. Sorry, a great one about that. Metre is a poetry does not need metre, but metre is essential to poetry. I can't remember exactly how it goes. I think there's something about walking a tightrope, I believe. I think that's it. I used it in a thing that I did for the Scottish Books Council a while ago, but I can't remember exactly what the quote was. I'm terrible at remembering quotes from people. So, like I say, so if you want to access Sorley, like I said, New of Arstock's good. There are a few translations out there. I think there might have been a new kind of collection called Halig, which I think is easily to get as well. If you want to access it, you can find almost all the Gaelic poems not in translation on sorleymaclean.org if you go to find the Gaelic pages. But if you really want to, like I say, do a deep dive, you can do Sorley here. And like I said, towards the end of his life, Sorley was very, very happy to see lots of grandchildren be born. And like I say, actually another Sorley MacDonald, who is actually Sorley's namesake, his own grandson Sorley, and you'll find Sorley on Instagram as Camera Hahu, and a very good friend of mine, a very good neighbour, and in fact I'm very glad that I know I know all Sorley's grandchildren, and I'm very happy to say that I'm good pals, very, very close friends with 3 of them, and very good pals with the rest, so when I see them. So Sorley had a great deal of joy in his life, but also sadly his daughter Katina predeceased him towards the end of his life, which was a very sad event. And towards the end of his life, again, he'd more kind of go around Europe reading his poetry, and becoming was very much feted as the great one of the great voices of the Gaelic Renaissance. And in fact, I'll try. And as a lot of it was written here, read 2 more poems just to finish off this here. One that if you go and you look at Sorley Maclean's Island, you'll find this one online reasonably easily, and it's called Ard Museum na Héireann, National Museum of Ireland. And you'll see him doing it in the famous Sandy Bell's pub in Edinburgh, which is where all the great poets kind of would hang out when they were in Edinburgh, or if they lived in Edinburgh, they were there anyway. McCaig and Morgan and Muir and Henderson, Hamish Henderson, George Campbell Hay, McDermott, they would all be there having drams, drinking pints, reading poetry, arguing about poetry. So if you see this one of him doing this reading, I think it's Dillon McLennan introduces him, and I think you see a very young Ali Bain sitting in the corner, although he hasn't really changed in about the 50 years or the 45 years since it's been filmed. You'll see it here, and it's Ard Museum na Héireann, and it says Ans na lion donna seo sean lon uwag na ddúj, lín na hí an crí na Yorkbergs an crí gach géil gan anya gyda hawn an géil. Cad yr ein mysio ach gym fach gas am Ard Museum na Héireann spot verig ach rúag na falla si caran salach ar in líni a fa unúar ar a chwri is doch al oomsa yw ule a hestri peler nor I beekni just I tanken nor I echri nor I spreeg na bon echtri in líni var o connele an an Ard fost af a Héireann sé gulchag de híberst a chur soas a hain is seher as nuven an liafail haar krok na tjefrach an Héireann. And cúri mór haas na huye in seher a cúri chas a fost office is a glamic rajent an agent. And talking there, he talks about James Connolly, the great Irish socialist and patriot who was involved in the Eastern Rising, and was shot by British soldiers despite the fact that he was wounded. They were so obsessed with shooting him they tied him to a chair, which is what he talks about. And although he was born in Edinburgh, he was actually born in the Irish community in the Cowgate. So when Sorley's reading that poem in Sandy Mills, he's probably above where Connolly himself worked. And this is the translation. The National Museum of Ireland. In these evil days when the old wound of Ulster's disease suppurating in the heart of Europe and the heart of every Gael who knows that he's a Gael, I've done nothing but see in the National Museum of Ireland the rusty red spot of blood rather dirty than the shirt that was once on the hero who was dearest to me of them all, who stood against bullet or bayonet or tanks or cavalry, or the bursting of frightful bombs, the shirt that was in Connolly in the General Post Office of Ireland, while he was preparing the sacrifice that put himself up on a chair that's higher, holier than Leofoil, and that is on the hill of Tara in Ireland. The great hero is still sitting on the chair, fighting the battle in the post office and cleaning streets in Edinburgh. So that shows kind of the very Pan-Celtic, the Pan-Celtic nature of Sorley, that he saw himself as a Gael with a continuation from down into Ireland. In fact, his brother Callum Maclean, who again Callum himself was a genius in terms of folklore. If you follow the Callum Maclean project on Facebook, you'll find a great deal of rich stuff about Gaelic across it. And Callum, of course, spent time in died of cancer, actually, sadly, at a very young age. But he lived in Ireland for a long time and had a connection. And very quickly, we'll do this one here. That he lived in a place very close to Cosh-Araga, Connemara, a place where I spent a lot of time when I'm over doing Irish and doing Maclean. And in fact, Sorley's grandson Gillespie, who works for BBC Gillespie MacDonald, you'll have heard him on the Gaelic radio. We were playing a game once there, and over came an Irishman, and he says, "Oh, are Sorley Maclean's grandchildren playing? Any of them playing?" And I was like, "Yes, that's one of them over there." And the guy came over and introduced himself, and he'd met Sorley when he was young, and he'd also. But Callum says, "Your great uncle lived in that house on the top of the hill there." So that connection was there, and Sorley wrote this incredible thing called Cua Callum MacGill-Eain, which you can read in. You can read also in Callum Maclean's book, The Highlands, which I recommend to anybody. I know my good friend Agavo Braun's very pro that book, and I would recommend anybody learning Gaelic or just interested, or if you're fluent in Gaelic, read it, buy it. The Highlands by Callum Maclean. Get it on Amazon now. Go and buy it. It's fine. Don't care. Just give it. Bezos is not going to get any poorer anyway, but it's going to get richer. I don't know where else you would buy it. You can get. It tells you a lot about the history of the Highlands. But anyway, when Callum died, Sorley wrote an incredible eulogy, which is about, I think, 7 or 8 pages long. And it's it. But here's this line here, and we use this one in all the Conqueria projects, which is great. Has Gaelorst in Cosh-Araga on the Erin Hall, idir an Cerarua Spagel, Gagu Imigsnaim, Vau Gael Erin mar Eliu Hain Sintraim, Gan je hier anders in Elia, nach the Repen Koer, nach the Veil Mila Bliana, Buai, Heel Buan. You were talked of in Cosh-Araga over in Ireland between Carrow and Spadil. You left many a knot. You were to the Gaels of Ireland as one of themselves and of their people. They knew the humanity that the sea did not tear, that 1,000 years did not spoil the quality of the Gael permanent. So it's just that's part of it as well. So, and I think I believe Gibbs told me that when his Shinner died, that there was actually a vigil held in Dublin for Sorley. So it showed the impact that he had, not just in Scotland but across. And we've talked about him being considered one of the great European poets. Of course, writing Gaelic meant that he's dealt with by most people in translation, and as we heard from Seamus Heaney in reading the extracts from Stepping Stones, that he has to deal with it in in translation mostly. Although Seamus Heaney was, like you said, had enough Irish to deal with a little bit. So, but most people are. But in terms of those who were Irish speakers, they accessed Sorley mostly through Gaelic, and they understood it, and they really appreciated him as one of the great Gaelic poet of the 20th century. So one of the things we talked about though is if you're joining us just now, what I was saying earlier on was if you really want to find out quite a lot about Sorley the person though, you can find out a lot in his son-in-law Dave Ross, his book Highland Herald, which again is a great wee book. I think it's Berlin that published that one, and it just has lots of nice little kind of human anecdotes about Sorley. Sorley was a real character, as well as being an incredibly gifted head teacher and a poet. He just was a family man, and has lots of kind of great little lots of great stories. In fact, Rudy Skye, who's just joined us, his mum Shona always has lots of good little stories about Sorley meeting tourists, and I've talked about how Sorley had a great interest in genealogy, that he would accost them, and well, not accost them, he would just get them into conversation and then tell them all about the genealogy of various people, blah blah blah. Of course, Summerland Square in Portree is the big square there where the buses are and the Warmwood was, and Summerland is where the name Sorley comes from. And I think Shona, Rudy's mum, just told me a story about him explaining this to some tourists of Japanese or German origin. He just wanted to know where the toilets were. But anyway, but that's thing. But I think one of the great loves that Sorley had was Shinty, and his three of his grandsons, Sorley, Maclean and Gibbs, all played for Skye. Sorley in fact still does, and so does Gibbs actually. Made a comeback this year, just in time to win some medals. And they were so Sorley himself played when he was young. He played as a pupil, but also when he returned to school. And at that point in Skye, they used to have a little a tournament called the Robertson Cup, which was played for between like the areas of Skye, and Portree High School had their own team, which the teachers could play for as well. And we don't know what happened to the Robertson Cup. Supposedly, local Skye legend may have pawned it in Glasgow at some point, but nobody's sure. But anyway, it was a good wee game. But in 1 year, Skye, Portree High School won it. And he wrote this really poem, and actually this is maybe one of the last poems that Sorley ever wrote. And it appears in Century Remembered, the Skye Camanachd history, which is available from Skye Camanachd. They've still got 100 boxes of it in the loft, I believe, in the clubhouse, but a very good book. Written by Neil Donald's father Martin, actually, the late Martin MacDonald. Very good book, very good social history of Skye. Anyway, this is on Sharach Nike Jiag, Shachjiag at Ichad. In Rune at the Lehen and Hua Porstree, who is cool of Alda, Rune Moor in Mine Borland, skip a Scotland for Stree. Gillian Muhia Jiag is Muhach Jiag, Iad Ule Giant is Scarcheld, Cruad Och is Tahpi, Skianich Rarsich agus Ferriu, Liosach Moor, Soccer Lodger. La och in Lechet Brionna, La Grianoch Cune, Gunstein Kja Erichulian, no it Claggan in Store. Ach an Jew Kja Ille Rune Moor na Borland, Kja an Laich in a Gala, Kier Haar na Hoigri, a Chail an Oige, is Och na Rin, ja, Jiag Marav. Chailiad Ula an Oige is in Toshoch Marlin Ille, ach in Kjaun Dabli on it, Borop le Kunners na Choggi, le Genius, Leonchin agus Baas, a Herrick Flurig in the Harvest, to get a haar of old Chujas. An Blionna ha Buyen Ille, a Chiarsko Glazed and Skull for Stree, a Chiarsko Calamarish and Skippe, a Vassen Stree, a Rune na Borland, men de Vark and Leched Blionna, in Lean Ladger Uche Oigri. Spring 1937. On the long wide field northeast of Portree, up behind the village, the big home farm Shinty field, the Portree school team. The boys about 16 and 17, all well made and full of vigour, hardy and courageous, from Skye and Rassay, and one big, strong and gentle from Lewis. A day 50 years ago, a calm sunny day, without a thread of mist on the coolings or on the skull of the store. But today another mist on the big home farm field, mist of the days that have gone, dim over the youth who have lost their youth, and 8 of the 12 dead. They all lost their youth, which was at first like any in our generation, but before 2 years had ended, barbarous with the dangers of the war, sickness, wounds and death, which withered the flowers of the customary, though the majority survived. This year there's another band, quite as skilled in the school of Portree, quite as hardy as the team that stood on the home farm field before the 50 years surged on that strong generation of the young. So, that's a little poem about the Shinty in Skye, and most of those men will be in their 50s now that were playing in that Portree High School team there in 1987. But very kind of thinking about the impact of war, and you see that. So, as somebody who was really a war poet at the start, then returning to that in some of his last poems, I think there's a couple more that were published in his lifetime here, Festiber, and a waxing moon of slate, Gallican Ash of King H, which I believe is is about Salma Rostock, and that's actually the name of Roger Hutchinson's book about it as well. Gallican Ash, and you can read things. There's of course the Cohen, it's a big kind of political socialist poem. In here, where is it actually? Can I find it? There's one about. This is one of the big. But I tell you, if you're learning Gaelic, just get into Gaelic poetry. It's a great way to kind of pick up words that you might not normally learn, but then try and use them. And I'm just trying to find one of the best poems. Actually, this is where I learned. I'm just trying to find now he could write quite good Oir, and Aoir. Oir is a satire. And as you know, the Gaelic poets were renowned for being satirically. They were supposed to have a real they could have a power that could, they were considered to be dangerous, that somebody might give. You could wound somebody with your bardic. If you could use bars, it would throw things, and people think that would cause curses with a power. And you've got there's a couple here. Actually, there's two here now. One is for the. You've got a couple of these were not published in his lifetime, but I'll read this one for the crack. Maybe not. It's Dunfa, but no, here we go. No, Sorley Macgill-Eain. Greeting to Kennedy Fraser. Sorley Macgill-Eain bein uasal isha gun chron. Spoia Kjolri Luvor, is Curry Shuch Garin Locht. So the greeting to Kennedy Fraser. Marjorie Kennedy Fraser was a woman, a Gael, who kind of wrote Gaelic, collected Gaelic songs, and then kind of wrote them into kind of the music hall style of the time, and did quite a good job at kind of finding these, but then also translated them into kind of, she kind of just made them. You kind of, well, you'll get the message. But this story pretty much sums up how Kennedy Fraser affected the Gaelic. Says, greetings to Kennedy Fraser, gentlewoman without fault. She castrated her potent muse and put sugar on the mutilation. So that word spa is the Gaelic for castrate. Spahug. It's castrating. There you go. It's a good. Now that's I had a very, very mercurial, the late great Carter Docherty, when we were at Glasgow University, used to always go on. He seemed to be obsessed with the castration of animals. It was a baditso, he would say, and it turned out it would always be somebody with the word spa. Good word for you, spahig. Hi, it is spahig. He's been castrated. Anyway, but anyway, we've been talking about Sorley Maclean here for the last kind of half an hour. So I hope you've enjoyed finding out a bit about Sorley. If you're watching this back on playback, thanks for sticking with it. Read a few of his poems, kind of tried to see best way to access him. Of course, Sorley is part of the set text in English as well. I don't think English teachers in Scotland have really got with the programme in terms of teaching Sorley yet. I think there may be a cultural gap there perhaps, or they're not entirely sure where to start, or they maybe find him a bit difficult because they don't understand, like I say, maybe because they don't understand him in English. But I think we would be a lot more richer if more people read more Sorley Maclean, both in translation and by accessing the original Gaelic. So anyway, like I say, 110 years today since the birth of the late great Sorley Maclean, one of the great bards of the 20th century. If you want to go the full bifter, buy yourself Sorley Maclean Curial Lemrich. If you want to kind of just dabble a bit, you can buy New Varstock. You can buy Canongate. You can also find there's Hallig, and also, like I said, David Ross's Highland Herald has lots of really nice little stories about Sorley as a human being, as a person in there. But however you access Sorley, just go to sorleymaclean.org. You'll find lots of information, videos in there, and also a wee tribute to the late great Martin Bennett as well. If you want to listen to his bothy culture, that's where I first heard Sorley intoning in his voice, and I managed to do this without doing a Sorley Maclean impression. So I think I better quit, because he does. Once you learn how to do a Sorley Maclean impression, you can't stop. But we are paying tribute to him, so I wouldn't do that here. But an incredibly sonorous voice. But anyway, go and look up a bit of Sorley Maclean. Post it up on Facebook or on here on Insta or Twitter, something like that. Just pay a little bit of tribute and enjoy. But anyway, Caú Harston, Sorry Slam Live agus Haitian Rieshif, Cheering Drast.